Welcome to Authors Without Borders Presents. I'm the host for today's show, Joyce Keller-Walsh, and my guest is Craig O'Connor.
Hello there.
Craig has had an interesting background, not only as an author, but also as a film editor, and we'll talk a little bit about that. He was born in Worcester, and he graduated from Stonehill College nearby, and then went to the University of Miami and graduated with an MFA in film. Tell us a little bit about that.
About University of Miami?
Yes, how did you happen to go there, and what was your interest in film at the time?
I love film. In fact, it's funny that we're talking about this now because, as you know, Roger Ebert passed away about 3 days ago, and the Siskel and Ebert show was one of the things that really got me loving film. I mean, it was just because they talked about it so well, and they were funny, and you know, there was a part of me that wanted to be a part of that world, and also the writing aspect. I wanted to make up stories, and filmmaking and directing is another version of writing. You know.
And is that what they taught at?
Yes.
And then both writing and directing.
The writing and directing, and where to play and how to work a camera, where to place the camera, and all the rules. And it's funny because film school, there is only a few set rules that you need to know, and I've for years been playing with the idea of creating a website called 5 Minute Film School. So basically, this tells you everything you need to know, and then the rest is just if you're any good. You know, it's just practice and seeing if you have any good ideas and stuff like that. Because there are just a few basic rules that you need to know about script writing, about how to place the camera, screen direction, things like that. And it was probably the best time I ever had in life so far. It costs a lot of money, which I'm still paying off, but it was definitely the best time, and I made a short film called Mild-Mannered Man, about a man who's arrested for eating with bad table manners, and he's conditioned to eat with good table manners. He picks up the wrong fork in the simulation. He gets an electric shock and things like that. So.
And this was as part of the program to be shown, or is this afterwards? When did you do this?
It was part of the program. That's how you had to graduate.
You
need to make your film. And I made my film and graduated, and then basically about a year later was off to California.
That's what I was going to ask you. How long between the time you graduated and the time you went to LA?
It was about a year. I was simply a bit scared, you know, even though I was living in Miami and not really making much money. You know, the idea of moving somewhere else, either New York or Los Angeles, was a little bit scary, a bit daunting.
Did you have a job to go to, or did you just land and decide to look around?
Yeah, it kind of landed, looked around a bit, and lived off the money that I was given to buy a car with, which was difficult. I did get a writing job pretty quickly.
How?
I answered an ad in Variety, and it was a gentleman who wanted me to write a screenplay about, oh boy, it was about snakes.
On a plane? No.
No. In fact, that would have been a great idea. No, this was snakes on a ski slope. In fact, that would have been a good title. We called it Snow Snakes, but it was about these snakes that eat plastic, and they were like an experimental thing, and then they get bigger, so naturally they're eating the skiers as they come down the slope.
Yeah, let me step back a moment. Just say that Craig's genre, although it spans several different things, including mystery, is really very focused on horror.
Oh, yes.
So we'll get back to that later.
This was not my idea. This was not my idea. I was just asked to do it, and none of the script didn't go anywhere, obviously.
Yeah.
It basically just wound up, working at a video store around the time that DVD started coming out, which was okay because it was an industry store. So lots of famous people would walk in all the time. And, I met people like Cuba Gooding and Burt Reynolds and Danny DeVito, and yes, he is that small, and most of them very nice people.
And how did you get then a job as video editor?
That came through meeting a gentleman who owned a production company. One of the jobs I had, sort of a moonlighting job, was working in a small music club, and I was the sound editor. I was the sound man and the show host, and there was a gentleman who would come in, played guitar, sang funny songs, and turns out he owned his own production company and in Burbank, and so we got to know each other. I said, could you use an assistant? And he said yes. In fact, he was working on this show called Street Music Los Angeles, which was about the clubs in LA and all the people playing there. And together, I was the editor, and together we made 4 episodes, which we got one of the local channels to play, and we wound up winning an Emmy for that series, even though we only did 4 episodes. So I have an Emmy statue at home.
Congratulations,
with my name on it.
that's wonderful.
Yes.
Where did you go from there? How did you parlay that into the next step?
The next step of, well, by the time, I was there for about 5 years, and by the time things weren't, didn't go incredibly well with the company, and after that, basically did a lot of temping. But there was a time period when I was between jobs, and where I'd written this, actually. And I'd finished it.
This being
Happy Holidays. This is a collection of short stories, suspense short stories, sort of Twilight Zone type stories. Each one takes place on a holiday. And so that's the theme that goes through it. And someone at a local bar that I used to go to, who also was a writer, said, why don't you try self-publishing? And I was like, the old stories about, you got to buy 1 million copies up front, and you have to keep them in a storeroom somewhere, and who has the money for that? But he said, no. He says, try going through Amazon, which is CreateSpace. The company they own is CreateSpace. So like I said, I was out of work, so I had the time. Turns out it wasn't an expensive thing to do. They're print on demand, so you can buy 5 if you want, and you get them at cost. And I got a what do you call it? Microsoft Publisher, the software, so I could do the layout, and I couldn't afford it, so I got a 60-day free trial. Sat down, taught myself how to do that, and within a month of signing up with CreateSpace, I had this book. And
now, did you choose the cover? How did the cover come about?
The cover is one I designed myself. I have some knowledge of, well, I won't call it design. I know how to work Adobe Photoshop. This is basically throwing ketchup at a calendar, photographing it, and then putting it in Photoshop, because the photograph made the calendar look yellow and the ketchup look brown, and it wasn't any good. So basically just redoing it, using that as a guideline, redoing it so it came out looking reasonably nice. And most of the covers are ones that I've done myself, with the exception of The Monster of Modern Times. This was done by a graphic designer.
This is a particularly interesting cover.
Oh, you like that one, do you?
Yes, I do. Did you design that?
Yes, that's my arm. It's me doing that.
I don't know if people can see that closely,
know,
but you can always go to your website and have a better look, which is
www.craigo'connor.info. CraigO'Connor.info.
And it's a very, very colorful website. I urge you to take a look at it. Now, you were still in Los Angeles when you published your first book.
Yes.
And then, did you come back to Massachusetts right after, or
no,
how long did you stay
I was still hopeful that there would be some. But by that time, the time I published was 2009, and so the recession had begun, and we didn't know how long it was going to last, and it's still going on. But I didn't come back to Massachusetts till 2010, and by which time I had so much fun publishing Happy Holidays that I said, I want to do this immediately. I want to do it again. And as luck would have it, about 3 years earlier, I'd written The Whitechapel Five, which was my first novel. I'd written this, and it had been in the drawer or on the computer drive, so to speak. Nothing was happening with it. And I said, well, why not? I've got a completed book. And 3 months after Happy Holidays, The Whitechapel Five came out.
Now, did you use an editor for that, or just wrote it up yourself?
I wrote it up myself. I found that the best way, you definitely need money to get a really decent editor, to do a good job. And if you get members of your family or your friends will do it, they mean well, but they won't catch everything. And also, since you're not paying them, they'll say, oh, yes, I want to do it, but, I'm reading this right now. I just got a book out of the library, and, it's due back in 3 days, and then they get another book out of the library. So it'll sit on their shelf for a long time.
And it costs, up to maybe $500 or better to get a good editor?
To get because I've had, I've met editors, and they've made offers, and I always feel bad to say, I always say, don't think I don't have a need for you. I'm not one of these people saying, I don't need anybody. But it's just, money's tight in in the recession.
Now, did you attempt to have any of your short stories published elsewhere before you had them in a collection, such as horror-based or mystery-based magazines?
I did. Didn't have a lot of success at it. None whatsoever. But that's the wonderful thing about living in the modern era. And I'm very down on my modern era. I'm always thinking, things are never as good as they were back in the old day. But especially in LA, I was meeting people who, because of all the tools you have at home with computers, I met musicians who were recording their albums at home and pressing them up at home and going out to clubs and selling them. They weren't going through a label or a recording studio or anything. Filmmakers were making their films at home and putting them on YouTube or any of the other video sharing sites. And I said, well, and no one is saying. Once upon a time, this was known as vanity publishing.
Press.
It wasn't looked at as it's like, oh, you haven't been given the nod by a publishing company.
And also, it cost a lot more back when it was vanity press.
And back then it was looked down on, and nowadays nobody looks down on it because this is just the way everyone's working now.
Right.
Is now you can actually do it at home and just put it out, and it feels good.
How are you marketing it? That's the thing. That's the hard part. Because even if you go to a traditional publisher, you have to market your own books.
You do, yeah. It's not an easy thing to do. As you know, I come on shows like this and smile into the camera and just be generally charming and witty. But just trying to talk about it wherever you go, putting it out on, these books are available on Amazon, but they are, it's a big store. It's a big area,
Right.
You got to get people to look
Now,
for you.
Are they also available in certain bookstores?
There are a couple of bookstores that are stocking them right now, sort of in my general area of where I live.
In Easton?
Paperback Junction. I don't know if you know of them.
I don't, but
they
maybe some of our viewers might.
Yes, it's a great place, and support your local bookstores.
Yes, absolutely. Well, there aren't enough of them anymore. As you know, the brick and mortar stores are going by the wayside.
That is one of the things about the modern era that I'm not happy about. I love a good bookstore to just go and spend some time at, and nowadays if you're a little bit bored at home and what do you want to do? So, well, you can't go to a bookstore, can you?
Now, do you use the social media, tweeting, Facebook, blogging to promote your books?
I use Facebook, LinkedIn, which is a great resource. Facebook is a lot of fun. You have to compete with the pictures of the cute dogs, but it's fun to put that out there, especially to meet up with, say, people that you haven't spoken with since high school, and they say, well, what have you been up to? I've been up to this,
Now, they're available both as print and ebooks, or print only?
All four is print. The first two, Happy Holidays and The Whitechapel 5, are also available as ebooks. You can get them on Amazon. And I haven't yet converted the last two. I'm just basically want to see how the first two are going to sell.
What is that process of converting? Take us through the entire thing. You have the software to conform to the uploading.
I have a feeling I'm going to steer you the wrong way because I've been told that there's much easier, that there's software now to do it.
Oh.
And when I did it, I just basically I went line through line to set up the format because I know a thing or two about HTML. And so I sort of set it up as HTML, as basically a website. And it was a long process for both books. And
now, you have an undergraduate degree in computer science, right?
Computer science.
So maybe a little easier for you than for some others.
This was back in the early 90s when computers were, there wasn't, Windows didn't even exist in 92 or whenever that was. So there was a lot of, as with anyone who knows anything about computers, you have to keep learning, you have to keep expanding your knowledge and trying to get on top of all the new ways. And I think the brand new software for ebooks is probably something I'm going to have to look into soon.
What is the cost, would you estimate, for uploading for a print book between the actual, whatever the process entails and the cover, et cetera? What is the bottom line in cost? Would you say?
I would say it's not expensive. For someone who wasn't working, and I was able to put out 2 books 3 months apart. So I mean, that should tell you it's a guy who's living on unemployment at the time. Not expensive at all. Depending on where you go, CreateSpace, only charges you for proofs, and that's one of the ways where they kind of make their money is if you keep. You correct it, you send it in, they send you a proof you have to pay for, and then you find more errors. And if you do that 3 or 4 times, but you have no one to blame but yourself because it should have been right the first or second time.
Although that's difficult.
It's difficult. It is difficult, as we already talked about, having an editor, someone who can flag everything right away.
Right.
And since I designed the covers myself, again, that didn't really cost anything. It just cost the fact that I knew how to work Photoshop.
And what about the spine? That too, or?
Oh yes. Well, they do that.
And the back cover.
Yes, they do. They do all that. You just write what you want, and it's sort of these covers are templates. And you just give them the photo.
And would you encourage writers, especially as new writers, to go that route as opposed to sending out the query letter and going through the traditional agent?
I would say maybe both, if possible, because I think definitely I think a new writer would it feels good. It's definitely the way it feels good to have product that you can show people, and that you can sell, and that you can promote. I think there is a chance that, say, a new writer, especially someone young, like say someone just out of high school, would probably use this before they're really ready to publish, and I think that would be a bit of an embarrassment later on. I'm kind of glad that I waited so long, until I was about 39 the first time I published, because by that time I'd been writing for so many years that I'd basically worked out all my problems with writing by the time I finally decided to publish. And I think a young writer say, "Oh, good! I just wrote 7 short stories, and I can now publish it."
Well, that is a problem because there isn't any quality control really on what goes out through self-publishing. Although there are a lot of books that are published through traditional publishers that are really awful too. But there's that filter, at least, that you think, well, someone's vetted this.
Someone has.
Yeah, exactly. To talk a little bit about the horror genre, because this is something that we haven't discussed on Authors Without Borders Presents with an author. We've had one of our group writes fantasy, but horror has a very special genre and it has a very targeted audience. How do you determine who that audience is, and how do you reach them?
Well, the funny thing about that audience is when I talk about my books, I do get a lot of people who are like, "Oh, that's not really for me." They sort of back away. But that doesn't mean I'm writing for a small group of people. It's a niche audience, but it's a huge niche. People love being scared. Some people tell me they can watch a horror movie but not read a scary book, and some people it's the other way around.
Yeah.
But people do love being scared, and I love it myself. The horror genre is something that I've grown up with. Stephen King, of course.
I was just going to ask you, do you feel kinship mostly towards him, or
yes,
is he the closest?
We read all of his stuff in my family, when I was growing up, and his books were all over the place, amongst other books. My parents were great readers and still are.
I'm just going to take a moment for people who've tuned in a little bit late and just seeing us here.
Shame on you.
Shame on you. This is Authors Without Borders Presents. I'm Joyce Walsh, and my guest is Craig O'Connor, who has published 4 books and has a lot of other credentials to his name. But we're talking right now about horror. What do you enjoy reading yourself? What do you enjoy watching? And how do you separate yourself from some of the gory things that you imagine and put on page?
It is a little bit difficult to. Well, who told you I separate myself?
Well, you didn't come in costume.
Hello. I could come in talking as Boris Karloff.
That's right, or Jack the Ripper.
Yes. But the separating yourself, the funny thing about writing scary stuff is, you have to get into that zone. And the funny thing about the 2 novels that I have, Whitechapel 5 and The Monster of Modern Times, Monster is the sequel to the Whitechapel 5.
Which would give a little discussion about what the Whitechapel 5 is.
The Whitechapel 5 is about a real, what do you call those? The real life crime writers. And that's a big genre these days. And here's the book, The Whitechapel 5. And it's mostly about how he's writing a book about Jack the Ripper, and he's not the Ripper, but the writer, Mickey Turner is his name. He's very well known for describing the gory scenes, and his nickname is Icky Mickey Turner. And he's a bit full of himself, and he loves what he does, and he finds out that there's been a murder on a college campus, and that it involves a secret society called the Whitechapel Five. And because he knows all about Jack the Ripper, he knows that that's a reference to the Ripper, and he thinks this would be a marvelous opportunity to sort of tie in with what I'm doing. He also secretly hopes to maybe figure out, be there when the killer is caught, maybe even to solve the crime himself.
And a lot of this takes place on what is a sort of local campus substitute, right?
It's not Stonehill. Before you students out there get any ideas, I created a campus on the Avon-Brockton line, which there is no campus there, so with a large wooded area.
So it has a very New England flavor to it.
Yes, without a doubt. And it's basically, I forgot what the question was originally.
Well, just to give the viewers a little idea of, tease them a little.
Oh. Well, basically, at first, he, like I said, he's very full of himself, and he decides that, it'd be wonderful if he could catch the criminal. As he spends more time there, he comes to know some of the students, and he comes to suddenly realize, instead of just writing about a crime, which is what all real-life crime writers do, they write about something that's already happened and that they really have no connection with. He suddenly thrust himself into the middle of it, and he suddenly realizes it's no fun to be talking with people who may be the next victim. And he does go through that, and it changes him during the course of the book. He realizes that if he's going to catch this criminal, it's not because he wants his name in the paper or Icky Mickey has risen to a new level. It's because he generally wants to see someone caught and see some lives saved.
Now, you've decided to write a sequel. I have read the original, but I haven't read the sequel. Tell us, how do you write a sequel to, is it just using him as the character with a totally different set of circumstances?
Using him as the character, but it is a different crime. It's 3 years down the road. His experiences from the Whitechapel Five have changed him to a degree, and he's retired from writing. And in this one, in the Whitechapel 3, his marriage was breaking up, and by this time it's healed again. They're back together, but there's a criminal out there who wants to be the star of an Icky Mickey Page Turner, and he thinks, if he commits some nasty enough crimes, this will get our friend's attention, and he'll write about him again. Of course, Mickey doesn't want anything to do with it.
So, do you think this is going to be an ongoing character for you? Will you do other books?
I think I'd like to
Mickey
write
Turner?
at least one more Mickey Turner. Mysteries are tough to write. I don't know if I haven't read your fiction yet, but they are incredibly difficult to write. And I'm a appreciator of the old kind of mystery where there are certain clues that people find and you don't really know what they're for until it's all fit into the puzzle. Unlike the mystery we get today, which is we found a hair, let's take it to the lab. It is Frank. That doesn't really do anything for me. I like sort of the old-fashioned kinds, and I'd like to do one more with Mickey at the very least. And especially since in these days, one of the popular trends is not, hey, I've got a terrific book. I've got a terrific series of books.
Right.
Right. Thank you, J.K. Rowling. But yes, if you can sell not just one book, but if you can, it's like selling someone a series of cars over the course of 10 years. If you can sell someone a series of books over the course of 10 years, you look wonderful to any publisher.
And you get a loyal reader.
Yes.
Which is what hopefully we'll get today. Hope people will go to your website, and we'll put that up on the screen and have another look at your books and short stories, and tell us how far along are you in your next book?
Well, I have started writing another book. It's more of it is going to involve a ghost, but it's not going to be a incredibly scary one. I want to do something more along the lines of a dramatic romance involving a ghost. And I'm a few chapters in.
Good for you.
Yeah. Plus writing short stories too. Whenever the muse doesn't knock on that door, you answer the other door.
And the short stories, at least the ones that I've read, are a little bit gorier than the novel. And with that, we'll close, and thank you very much, Craig, for being my guest already.
No. CraigO'Connor.info. Be there or be square.
That's right. Thank you all. Good night.
Good night.